I walked into First Midwest Bank hoping someone would lend me $5,000 before the electric company shut my power off. 40 minutes later, the branch manager quietly locked his office door, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mr. Mercer, according to our trust department, you've been worth more than $41 million for nearly 8 years." I remember laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was the only thing my brain knew how to do when the world suddenly stopped making sense. If you'd told me that story a week earlier, I would have said you'd been watching too many late-night movies. But that's exactly how the strangest day of my life began. My name is David Mercer. I was 58 years old that spring, living alone in a worn-out ranch house on the east side of Springfield, Missouri. The paint on the porch was peeling. One shutter hung slightly crooked. Every time it rained, I put a bucket under the same leak in the laundry room because I couldn't afford to replace the roof. 5 years earlier, I buried my wife, Linda. Cancer doesn't just take a person. It empties a house. It changes how silence sounds. After she was gone, I kept working as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant outside town. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. I fixed conveyor belts, replaced motors, climbed ladders, and solved problems younger men often walked away from. Then overseas contracts changed everything. 3 months before my visit to the bank, management announced another round of layoffs. 28 years on the job, gone in less than 10 minutes. They gave me a cardboard box for my things and shook my hand as if that somehow made it better. Finding another job at 58 wasn't impossible. It just felt that way. Most employers smiled politely until they saw my age. "We're looking for someone with long-term growth potential." I heard that sentence enough times to understand what they really meant. My savings disappeared faster than I'd imagined. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, medication for my blood pressure. Everything kept coming due. The Monday morning I walked into the bank, I stopped at Casey's on Glenstone Avenue like I always did. One small black coffee. The cashier, a young woman named Emily, smiled. The usual, "You know me too well." She handed me the cup. "Good luck today." I hadn't told her where I was going. Maybe she could read worry on my face. By the time I reached the bank, the foreclosure notice folded inside my jacket pocket felt heavier than paper should. First Midwest Bank wasn't fancy. Same brick building. Same flower beds, same American flag out front. I'd opened my first checking account there back in the 80s. The loan officer introduced herself as Melissa. She couldn't have been older than 35. "What can I help you with today, Mr. Mercer?" "I need a home equity loan." "How much?" "5,000. She smiled kindly. "We'll see what we can do." We talked about my income history, my house, my employment. She typed quietly while asking routine questions. Nothing unusual. Then she entered my social security number. Her smile faded. She frowned at the screen. She clicked again. Another pause. "I'm sorry. Would you mind waiting just a minute?" "Of course." She walked quickly into another office. I assumed something was wrong with my credit report. Maybe an old address. Maybe identity theft. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, an older gentleman in a gray suit approached. "I'm Mark Henderson, the branch manager." He offered his hand. "Would you come with me?" His tone was calm, but there was something careful about it. He led me into his office and quietly closed the door behind us. Not locked, just closed. He picked up the phone. "I've got Mr. Mercer here." A pause. "Yes, driver's license matches." Another pause. "I understand." He thanked whoever was on the other end before hanging up. Then he looked at me with an expression I still can't describe. Half confusion, half concern. "Mr. Mercer, I'd like to verify a few things." For the next 20 minutes, he asked questions no loan officer had ever asked me. My grandfather's full name, Harold Mercer. My date of birth. Whether I'd ever served as trustee of a family estate. Whether I'd received any legal notices regarding a trust. Every answer was the same. No, no. I don't think so. I've never heard of one. Each answer seemed to make him more uncomfortable. Eventually, another call came in. This time, he put it on speaker. A woman introduced herself. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Angela Brooks. I'm with our Trust Services Department in St. Louis." Her voice sounded professional but gentle. "We've completed identity verification. I need to ask one final question." "Go ahead." "Did your grandfather Harold Mercer pass away in May of 2018? The room suddenly felt smaller. "Yes." "I'm sorry for your loss." There was another pause. Then she continued. "Mr. Mercer, you are listed as the sole lifetime beneficiary of the Harold Mercer Irrevocable Trust." I stared at the desk. "I'm sorry, the what?" "The trust currently holds assets valued at approximately $41 million. Nobody spoke. I honestly wondered if I was having some kind of medical episode. Finally, I managed to whisper, You've got the wrong David Mercer. We've confirmed your identity through multiple records. No, I actually laughed. My power's about to be shut off. I understand. I'm asking for a $5,000 loan. I understand. My checking account has $318 in it. I understand. Mr. Henderson slid a box of tissues toward me. Not because I was crying, because he thought I might. Angela continued. This trust has remained professionally managed according to your grandfather's instructions. Until today, no successful contact with the beneficiary had ever been completed. I frowned. What do you mean, no successful contact? We have records showing multiple notifications over several years. Each was returned or legally disputed during estate administration. Estate administration. Those two words pulled me backward 8 years. I was standing outside my father's house after my grandfather's funeral. My clothes were piled in garbage bags on the lawn. Richard Mercer, my own father, stood in the doorway. You've lived off this family long enough. I wasn't asking for anything. You won't be getting anything either. What are you talking about? Harold left you nothing. My younger brother Thomas leaned against his new pickup truck, arms folded. You heard, Dad? I've got nowhere else to go. Not our problem. I remembered picking up one of Linda's photo albums from the wet grass. I remembered driving away with everything I owned packed into an old trailer. Most of all, I remembered believing them. Back in Mr. Henderson's office, I realized my hands were shaking. Angela spoke softly. We recommend that you retain an experienced estate attorney before making any decisions regarding the trust. Can I see it? Mr. Henderson turned his monitor toward me. There it was. Harold Mercer Irrevocable Trust. Beneficiary, David Allen Mercer. Estimated value, $41 83 417.92. I didn't feel rich. I felt robbed. 8 years, 8 birthdays, 5 anniversaries without Linda, 3 months of wondering whether I'd lose my home. How many nights had I lain awake trying to figure out which bill could wait another week? How many times had I skipped replacing something because I couldn't afford it? Mr. Henderson finally spoke. Mr. Mercer. Yes. I've worked in banking for 32 years. He hesitated. I've never seen a case quite like this. Neither had I. As I walked back to my old Ford Escape, the foreclosure notice was still folded inside my jacket pocket. Only now it felt different. Not lighter. Heavier. Because somewhere between my grandfather's funeral and that morning, someone hadn't just hidden an inheritance. They'd stolen 8 years of my life. The first thing I wanted to do was drive straight to my father's house. I wanted to stand on his front porch, hold up the trust statement, and ask one simple question. Why? Instead, I drove home. That may not sound brave, but looking back, it was probably the smartest decision I made during the entire ordeal. Anger has a way of convincing you that the first move is the right one. Most of the time, it isn't. I barely slept that night. The trust statement sat on my kitchen table beside a stack of overdue bills. Every few hours, I'd walk over, read my own name again, then shake my head like it might disappear if I looked away too long. The numbers never changed. $41 million. Enough money to solve every problem I'd been carrying. Enough money to erase years of worry. And somehow it made me feel worse. Because every memory from the last 8 years suddenly had a question hanging over it. What if I'd known? Would Linda have spent her final months worrying about hospital bills? Would I have sold her wedding ring to pay for experimental treatments our insurance refused to cover? Would I have spent 5 years staring at a plain temporary marker instead of the headstone she deserved? I made myself a promise before sunrise. I wasn't spending $1. Not until I knew exactly what had happened. The next morning, I called the attorney Mr. Henderson had recommended. His name was Robert Vance. His office was in Kansas City, about 3 hours north of Springfield. He specialized in estate litigation. When his receptionist heard my name, she surprised me. Mr. Vance has been expecting your call. That stopped me. Expecting me? Your bank contacted him yesterday with your permission. I had forgotten signing the release forms before leaving the bank. She offered me an appointment the next morning. The drive to Kansas City gave me too much time to think. Interstate 49 stretched ahead in long, quiet miles. The radio stayed off. Linda used to say silence wasn't empty. It lets your heart catch up with your mind. Mine had a lot of catching up to do. Robert Vance looked exactly like the kind of lawyer older Americans tend to trust. Gray hair, dark blue suit, reading glasses balanced low on his nose. His office walls held framed law degrees beside faded family photographs. No flashy artwork. No expensive sculptures. Just shelves full of legal books that actually looked used. He shook my hand firmly. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. So am I. He waited until I sat down before opening a thick folder. I've spent most of yesterday reviewing the initial records your bank sent. He slid several copies across the desk. I think you're going to need some coffee. He wasn't joking. His assistant brought 2 mugs before he spoke again. The good news, he tapped one page. The trust appears completely legitimate. I let out a slow breath. The bad news, he folded his hands. The trust itself wasn't hidden. I frowned. What do you mean? It was administered exactly as your grandfather instructed. I stared at him. Then why didn't I know about it? Because something happened after your grandfather died. He opened another folder. This is the probate file. The documents were nearly 8 years old. The executor listed at the top made my stomach tighten. Richard Allen Mercer, my father. Vance pointed to another line. As executor, your father had a legal duty to notify every beneficiary. I never got anything. I know. Then how? He slid another document toward me. This is where things become interesting. It was a certified mail receipt, supposedly delivered to me, supposedly signed by me. Except, it wasn't my signature. Not even close. I looked at it for several seconds. No, Vance nodded. I didn't think so either. He reached for another document. This envelope was sent to an address in Springfield. I recognized it immediately. An old apartment building. I'd moved out nearly 6 years before my grandfather died. I wasn't living there. I know. Who changed it? We don't know yet. He leaned back. But someone filed paperwork claiming that was your current address. I felt the room getting warmer. So all the letters went somewhere you hadn't lived in years. I rubbed my forehead. This can't be legal. No, it isn't. For the next hour, he walked me through the probate timeline. Everything sounded ordinary at first. Harold Mercer died. The estate entered probate. The trust became active. Beneficiaries were notified. Except one. Me. Every time the court requested confirmation that I'd been notified, someone filed another affidavit. Every time certified mail came back, another explanation appeared. Unable to locate. No forwarding address. Beneficiary unavailable. On paper, it looked reasonable, until someone compared it with reality. Vance pulled another folder from a stack. This is what changed everything. Inside were records from the bank's trust department. Every year they attempted another contact. Every year, the correspondence failed. But why didn't anyone come looking for me? I asked. They believed the executor. My father. Yes, he told everyone I disappeared. He represented that you couldn't be located. I laughed bitterly. I've lived in Springfield my entire life. I know. My driver's license never changed. I know. I paid property taxes. I know. My Social Security earnings were reported every year. I know. He let those words settle. Which raises an obvious question. If I was that easy to find, why wasn't I found? Exactly. The answer sat between us without either of us saying it aloud. Someone had worked very hard to make sure no one looked too closely. Then Vance opened another folder. This concerns your grandfather's assets. I expected farmland, maybe a few investments. Instead, I found a remarkable story. Back in the early 1990s, Harold Mercer had quietly leased mineral rights beneath portions of the family farmland. Years later, renewable energy companies installed wind turbines across hundreds of acres. Rather than spending the income, Harold invested nearly everything. Blue-chip stocks, dividend funds, municipal bonds. He rarely talked about money. People assumed he was just an old farmer. In reality, he'd built extraordinary wealth without anyone outside a handful of professionals realizing it. He intended this for me. Vance nodded. He amended the trust twice. What? He handed me the final amendment, written in my grandfather's own words. David never asked me for anything. He showed up when everyone else was too busy. Character matters more than blood. I had to look away. I remember changing Grandpa Harold's oxygen tank, driving him to doctor's appointments, watching Cardinals games with him while he pretended not to fall asleep halfway through. I never did those things expecting anything. He was my grandfather. That was enough. After a long silence, I asked the question that had haunted me since yesterday. My father, Vance interrupted gently. I don't think your father acted alone. I looked up. What? He turned another page. Several legal forms. Different handwriting. Different initials. The filings became far more sophisticated after the first few months. They're too consistent, he said quietly. Too organized. So, I think someone understood paperwork. My brother, he didn't answer immediately. I don't like making accusations before evidence. But, he looked me straight in the eye. If I had to guess, he stopped himself, then smiled politely. I'd rather prove it than speculate. As I stood to leave, he gave me one instruction. Go home. That's it. Live your life exactly as you have. They'll notice if I suddenly disappear. They'll notice if you suddenly spend money. So I pretend nothing happened. For now. I've waited 8 years, I muttered. I suppose I can wait a little longer. He nodded. You won't be waiting. He closed the folder. We'll be building a case. The drive back to Springfield felt different from the drive up. Not because I had answers. Because I finally understood something. The people who stole my inheritance hadn't simply taken money. They'd built an entire lie. And lies like that don't collapse all at once. They crack. Quietly, one piece at a time. 4 months passed before I heard a single word from my family. Not a phone call. Not a letter. Not even one of those awkward messages people send when they suddenly remember you're still alive. Which, strangely enough, was exactly what Robert Vance had expected. They believe you're still the same man they threw away, he told me over the phone one afternoon. As long as they think that they'll keep acting naturally. So I did what I'd been doing for years. I got a part-time maintenance job at a small Baptist church on the south side of Springfield. It wasn't much money, but it covered groceries and kept me moving. I repaired leaky faucets, changed light fixtures, patched drywall, and mowed the lawn every Thursday morning before the preschool kids arrived. Nobody there cared that I was 58. They cared that when something broke, I fixed it. That was enough for me. The trust remained untouched. Technically, I could have withdrawn money whenever I wanted after completing the legal paperwork. Instead, I lived exactly as I always had. The foreclosure process had been paused after Vance quietly arranged a short-term loan against the trust without revealing its value publicly. My mortgage stayed current, but nothing else changed. I still drove my old Ford Escape, still bought my coffee at Casey's, still clipped coupons from the Sunday newspaper. Sometimes I caught myself wondering whether I was the crazy one. $41 million. And I was debating whether canned soup was cheaper at Walmart or Hy-Vee. Then one afternoon in late September, a cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, my full name written in elegant script. Inside was a wedding invitation. Emma Mercer and Daniel Collins request the honor of your presence. Emma, Thomas's daughter. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been 16 years old, waving politely from across a church parking lot while her father pretended not to notice me. There was also a handwritten note. We hope you'll come. Families should be together for special occasions. No signature, no apology, no explanation. Just family. I almost laughed. For 8 years, I hadn't been family. Now suddenly I drove to Kansas City the following morning. Vance read the invitation twice. Then he smiled. I was hoping they'd do something like this. You call this good news? I call it predictable. I don't. He leaned back in his chair. David, tell me something. What? If they knew you had the trust, they'd never invite me. Exactly. He folded the invitation carefully. They're still comfortable. And comfortable people make mistakes. I don't want to play games. I know. I just want the truth. You'll get it. He paused. But this wedding might give us something even more valuable. Witnesses. That single word stayed with me all the way home. The wedding took place 3 weeks later at a country club outside Branson, about 45 minutes south of Springfield. It wasn't the kind of place my grandfather would have liked. Too polished. Too expensive. Too concerned with appearances. I parked my faded Ford Escape between a brand new Mercedes SUV and a black Porsche Cayenne. The difference couldn't have been clearer. As I stepped out, I caught my reflection in the Escape's side window. Navy sport coat. White shirt. Old brown shoes I'd polished the night before. The elbows of the jacket were beginning to shine with age. It would have to do. Inside, soft piano music drifted through the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Servers carried trays of shrimp cocktails and sparkling drinks. I recognized dozens of faces. Aunts, uncles, cousins. People who'd spent years pretending I didn't exist. Most looked surprised to see me. Some smiled politely. Others looked away. Then I heard my brother's voice. Well, I'll be. Thomas walked toward me with both hands spread wide, wearing an expensive charcoal suit and a smile that never reached his eyes. David. Thomas. He looked me up and down. You made it. I was invited. He chuckled. I honestly wasn't sure you'd spend the gas money. A few nearby guests laughed awkwardly. I smiled. So was I. He blinked. What? I wasn't sure you'd spend the money on this place. His grin tightened for half a second. Then it came back. Oh, business has been good. I'm glad to hear it. He clapped me lightly on the shoulder. Help yourself to the buffet. I plan to. He walked away. One small exchange. Nothing dramatic, but for the first time in years, I noticed something. He wasn't as confident as he sounded. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Emma looked genuinely happy. Watching her reminded me of Linda. She used to cry at weddings, even strangers' weddings. She'd always squeeze my hand and whisper, "Don't you dare laugh at me." I smiled without realizing it. An older woman slid into the empty chair beside mine during the reception. I recognized her after a moment. My Aunt Carol, Grandpa Harold's youngest sister. She leaned closer. "You've got his eyes." I smiled politely. "So people tell me." "No." She shook her head. "I mean today." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She glanced around before lowering her voice. "Your grandfather came looking for you." The room suddenly disappeared around me. "What?" "The week before he died." I stared at her. "He asked Thomas where you were." My heartbeat quickened. "He said you didn't want anything to do with the family anymore." I couldn't speak. Carol continued quietly. "Harold cried." She swallowed. I'd never seen my brother cry before. "He believed him. He was very sick." She looked down at her folded hands. "He thought you'd abandoned him." The words landed harder than any punch I'd ever taken. All those years, I believed Grandpa never asked for me. The truth was exactly the opposite. Someone had made sure we never saw each other again. Carol reached over and squeezed my hand. "I've wanted to tell you that for years." "Why didn't you?" She looked ashamed. "I was afraid." Before I could answer, applause filled the room. Richard, my father, had taken the microphone. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was almost completely white, but his voice still carried the same certainty. "Family is everything." I nearly laughed. He continued, "Our family built everything we have through hard work, honesty, and standing together." Hard work, honesty, standing together. 3 lies in one sentence. People applauded. Then Thomas stepped beside him to make a toast. As he lifted his champagne glass, something flashed beneath the ballroom lights. Gold. A pocket watch. I knew that watch instantly. Grandpa Harold carried it every Sunday to church. He'd let me wind it when I was a little boy. The last time I'd seen it was at the funeral. "I want you to have this someday," he'd once told me. Now it rested comfortably in Thomas's vest pocket, like it had always belonged there. For a moment, everything inside me wanted to walk across that room and take it back. My hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then I heard Robert Vance's voice in my head. "Not yet. Truth first. Justice second. Anger last." I slowly opened my hands. Thomas noticed me watching the pocket watch. He smiled, then deliberately tucked it deeper into his pocket. He knew exactly what he was doing. When dinner ended, I picked up my jacket and headed toward the exit. I had almost reached the doors when I heard my father's voice behind me. "Leaving already?" I turned. "I've got an early morning." He nodded. "Drive safe." For just a second, neither of us spoke. Then I looked him in the eyes. "Enjoy tonight." His smile faded slightly. "What do you mean?" I kept my voice calm. "Reality has a way of arriving when people least expect it." I walked away before he could answer. When I pulled into my driveway a little after 11 that night, something caught my eye. A plain white envelope lay against my front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single brass key. Attached to it was a small tag. "Safe Deposit Box 311. Ozark Federal Savings." Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. I stood there in the porch, light turning the key over in my hand. Somebody knew the truth. And somebody had just handed me the next piece of it. I didn't sleep that night. The brass key sat on my kitchen table beside my coffee mug, catching the light every time I walked past it. Safe Deposit Box 311. Ozark Federal Savings. No name, no note, no explanation. Just a key. I called Robert Vance at exactly 8 o'clock the next morning. "I think you'd better come to Springfield," I said. He listened without interrupting while I explained the envelope. When I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. "Don't go alone." "You think it's important?" "I think somebody took a risk to get that key to you." "You think it's a trap?" "I think," he replied carefully, "that after everything we've uncovered, we don't make assumptions anymore." By 11, we were standing together inside the downtown branch of Ozark Federal Savings. It was one of those old banks that still had marble floors and brass railings polished so brightly you could almost see your reflection. A woman in her 60s greeted us at the front desk. "Good morning. How may I help you?" Vance slid his business card across the counter. "My client has reason to believe he's the lawful owner of Safe Deposit Box 311. She looked at the key, then at me. "One moment, please." 15 minutes later, after verifying my driver's license, my social security number, and several probate documents Vance had brought, she returned carrying a thick ledger. "I've been here 26 years, she said quietly. "I've never opened this box." "You've never opened it?" "It's been paid automatically through a trust account." My heart skipped. She led us into the vault. The room smelled faintly of cold steel and old paper. She unlocked the outer mechanism. I inserted the brass key. The lock clicked. Then she stepped away, giving us privacy. The metal box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to a small wooden table. For a long moment, neither Vance nor I touched it. Finally, he nodded. "Whenever you're ready." Inside were 4 items: a thick manila envelope, a leather-bound journal, a small digital voice recorder, and a gold pocket watch. I recognized the watch instantly. Grandpa Harold's. The same one Thomas had worn at the wedding. I stared at it. "How?" Vance frowned. "This can't be the same watch." I picked it up. There was a tiny scratch near the winding crown. I'd made that scratch when I was 12 after dropping it on Grandpa's garage floor. He'd laughed instead of getting angry. "No," I whispered. "This is the original." "Then what your brother wore?" "I was a copy." Someone had gone to remarkable lengths to fool everyone. My hands trembled as I opened the manila envelope. Inside was the original trust agreement. Not a copy, the original. Every page carried embossed seals. Original signatures. Original notarizations. Nothing had been altered. Beneath it lay another envelope with my name written in Grandpa Harold's familiar handwriting. "For David. Open only if I cannot tell you myself." I had to swallow before I could break the seal. The letter inside was only 3 pages long. "David, if you're reading this, then something didn't happen the way I planned. I asked Mr. Reynolds to make sure this trust protected you after I was gone. I also asked him to make sure no one, not even my own children, could change what belonged to you." I stopped reading. "Mr. Reynolds." "Who's Reynolds?" I asked. Vance searched the trust documents. "The original trustee." "What happened to him?" He turned another page. "He retired 6 months after your grandfather died." I kept reading. "Son, money isn't why I'm leaving this to you. I'm leaving it to you because you stayed. You never asked me for $1. You gave me your weekends. You fixed my fence. You drove me to every doctor's appointment. That matters." My eyes blurred. Linda used to tease me about those Saturday mornings. "You spoil your grandpa," she'd say. "I hope somebody spoils me when I'm 90. I smiled through tears. She never got the chance. There was one final paragraph. "If Richard ever tells you I forgot about you, don't believe him." The room fell silent. Vance quietly reached for the digital recorder. "Should we?" I nodded. He pressed play. For a second there was only static. Then, an old man's voice. Thin, tired, but unmistakable. "My name is Harold Mercer." I closed my eyes. I hadn't heard that voice in 8 years. "If you're listening to this..." He coughed. Then something has gone terribly wrong." Another pause. "I've been warned that family arguments sometimes begin after money enters the picture." A sad chuckle. "I pray mine doesn't." He took a slow breath. "David," just hearing my name and his voice nearly broke me. "You've always believed a man's word should mean something. I hope you never lose that. But if anyone tells you I changed my mind, they're lying." The recording ended with one final sentence. "I love you, son." No music. No dramatic speech. Just an old farmer telling his grandson he loved him. I don't remember crying. I only remember Vance quietly handing me a handkerchief. After several minutes, he cleared his throat. "This changes everything." "How?" "We no longer have to prove what your grandfather intended. We have proof. We have better than proof." He carefully stacked the documents. "We have original evidence that was never presented during probate." Before we left the vault, the bank manager approached us. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes, we found something else." He handed Vance an old signature card from the safe deposit box records. The access log. Only 3 people had ever entered box 311. Harold Mercer, Attorney James Reynolds, and Thomas Mercer. 1 visit. 6 weeks after Grandpa died. I stared at the date. He knew. Vance looked at me. He knew this box existed. And he left everything inside, maybe. Or, he paused. He took something. That afternoon, Vance immediately filed an emergency motion with the Greene County Circuit Court. Within 48 hours, the judge approved temporary injunctions, freezing dozens of business assets connected to Richard and Thomas Mercer. For the first time in 8 years, my father couldn't move a single dollar without court approval. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Word spread quickly through Springfield. By the morning of the hearing, reporters from KY3 and the Springfield News Leader had gathered outside the courthouse. Inside, Richard looked furious. Thomas looked nervous. When they saw me enter beside Robert Vance, neither one smiled. They had finally realized something had changed. They just didn't know how much. As the judge entered the courtroom, Vance leaned toward me. "Whatever happens today," I looked at him. "And tell the truth." I nodded. For 8 years, lies had controlled my life. It was finally time to see what the truth could do. The courtroom was already full when the judge took the bench. I had never seen so many familiar faces gathered in one place. Old neighbors, former co-workers, distant cousins, even people from my church had quietly slipped into the back row after hearing about the case on the local news. Nobody spoke much. The only sounds were shuffling papers and the low hum of the courtroom air conditioner. Across the aisle sat my father, Richard. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. For the first time in my life, he looked like a man who knew he wasn't in control. Thomas sat beside him, dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my old Ford Escape. He kept tapping one foot against the floor. Fast, restless, nervous. Robert Vance leaned toward me. "Remember," he whispered, "today isn't about revenge. It's about the truth." I nodded. That had become my anchor over the past several months. Every time anger tried to take over, I reminded myself that truth lasts longer than rage. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked over the case file. "This hearing concerns allegations of fraud, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty and concealment during estate administration." His voice was calm, almost routine, but every word carried weight. Vance stood first. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked the court through the timeline. Harold Mercer created an irrevocable trust. I was named the sole lifetime beneficiary. Richard Mercer accepted the legal duty of executor. Then the notifications began, or at least they were supposed to. One by one, certified mail records were displayed on the courtroom monitors. Every envelope had been addressed to places I'd never lived. Every affidavit claiming I couldn't be found fell apart under scrutiny. A handwriting expert testified that the signature acknowledging one of the certified letters was not mine. The original notary journal matched the trust documents exactly. Nothing had ever been changed inside the trust. Only the paperwork surrounding me had. The judge listened carefully, asking questions whenever something wasn't clear. Then Vance called the representative from the trust department. Angela Brooks. I recognized her voice immediately. She explained how the trust had continued operating exactly as Harold Mercer intended. The beneficiary was never removed, she testified. The funds remained invested. Annual contact attempts were made in accordance with trust policy. And what Vance asked, was Mr. Mercer never successfully contacted? Angela answered carefully. Because every official inquiry relied on the executor's filings and the addresses provided during probate. In other words, they believed my father. The courtroom grew quieter. Then came the letter, the one Grandpa Harold had written. The judge read it silently before allowing portions into evidence. No objections, no arguments, just silence. Finally, Vance held up the digital recorder. "Your Honor, this recording was found inside safe deposit box 311, alongside the original trust documents." The recording played through the courtroom speakers. Harold's voice filled the room. Older, weak, but steady. "If anyone tells you I changed my mind, they're lying." When it ended, nobody moved. Even the court reporter looked down for a moment before continuing to type. Then something unexpected happened. Richard slowly stood. "I'd like to say something." His attorney placed a hand on his arm. Richard ignored him. "I never wanted David to suffer." I looked at him. Those words should have meant something. Instead, they sounded tired. "I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Vance asked quietly. Richard looked away. "I trusted the wrong person." Every head in the courtroom turned toward Thomas. Thomas shot to his feet. "Don't do this." "You handled the paperwork," Richard said. "You told me everything was legal." Thomas's face turned red. "You signed every document?" "You said..." "No." Thomas slammed both hands on the table. "You wanted everything..." His voice echoed through the courtroom. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then he realized what he'd just done. His attorney slowly closed his notebook. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "I need a brief recess to speak with my client." The judge granted 15 minutes. Outside in the hallway, reporters rushed toward anyone willing to speak. I stayed where I was, leaning against the wall, watching people hurry past. Vance joined me. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know." "You expected to feel better." "I expected to feel something. Instead, I just felt tired." 8 years of carrying bitterness had become strangely heavy. When court resumed, Thomas's attorney made a formal motion to withdraw from representation, citing an irreparable conflict that had arisen during testimony. The judge didn't rule immediately, but noted the request for the record. Thomas no longer looked confident. He looked frightened. The rest happened quickly. Financial investigators testified about business loans secured using estate assets. Bank records traced money through several failed companies Thomas had controlled. Emails revealed discussions about delaying notification until David gives up. The evidence wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary. Spreadsheets, receipts, signatures, transfers. Sometimes the truth isn't hidden in explosions. Sometimes it's hidden in paperwork. By late afternoon, the judge issued temporary findings. Civil liability would move forward. The estate would be fully restored according to the trust. Additional criminal investigations into forgery and fraud would continue separately. Richard lowered his head. Thomas stared straight ahead. Neither looked at me. As people began leaving the courtroom, the judge stopped me. Mr. Mercer. Yes, Your Honor. I read your grandfather's letter twice. So did I. He smiled faintly. I think he'd be proud of how you've handled yourself. I thanked him and walked outside. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Mercer, do you have a statement? How do you feel? I stopped only once. I spent years believing money would have fixed my life. They waited. I was wrong. What fixed my life? I looked toward the courthouse doors. Was finally learning the truth. Then I walked away. The legal process lasted almost another year. Richard accepted responsibility for failing in his duties as executor. Thomas eventually pleaded guilty to multiple fraud-related offenses after additional evidence surfaced during the criminal investigation. Several business properties were sold to satisfy debts. The trust remained intact, exactly as Grandpa Harold intended. As for me, I never bought a mansion, never bought a sports car, never moved away. I paid off my mortgage, quietly replaced the roof, fixed the laundry room leak, installed the granite headstone Linda deserved years earlier. I stood there one crisp October morning, running my fingers across her name. I'm sorry it took so long, I whispered. The wind moved gently through the cemetery trees. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty when I left. I also established the Harold Mercer Technical Scholarship at Ozarks Technical Community College. Every year, it helps students studying skilled trades maintenance, welding, electrical work, HVAC, the kind of jobs that built families like ours. I bought a new Ford F-150. Nothing fancy, just reliable. It still gets dusty hauling lumber and supplies to the community farm I helped create on Grandpa's old land. Sometimes people ask why I still shop at the same grocery store, why I still drink coffee at Casey's, why I still live in the same little house. The answer is simple. Money changed what I could do. It never changed who I wanted to be. A few months ago, I visited Grandpa Harold's grave. I wound his old gold pocket watch and listened to it tick. Steady, patient, faithful. Just like the man who carried it. I hope I got this right, I said. The wind answered with silence. Somehow, that felt enough. Sometimes people think revenge means watching someone lose everything. I've learned it's something quieter than that. It's refusing to become the kind of person who hurt you. It's choosing peace after you've finally been given every reason not to. If this story reminded you that truth can take a long time to arrive, but it still matters, thank you for spending your time with me today. Take good care of the people who stand by you when life is hardest, because they're worth more than anything money can buy.